Hello everyone, so my presentation today is on Bertolt Brecht. He is a beloved German expressionist icon. He's mostly known for his work that he did writing poetry and other longer form operas. Brecht had fairly middle-class upbringings, and he was born in Augsburg, Bavaria on February 10th, 1898. Not much is really known about his parents, but we do know that he was living in a fairly comfortable position when he was younger. When Brecht was 16, the First World War started, and this was sort of a catalyst for what shaped a lot of his views on politics and on the role that people and artists should take in critiquing the government and how they should become involved in that. So along this time, he became very involved with the anti-war movements and involved with left-wing politics in general. And this sort of came to a head when really, I think I read at the encouragement of his father, in an attempt to avoid military service, he registered into a medical program at the Munich University. And this was because at the time there were exemptions for the draft. So if you were studying in university, in certain programs like the medical field, you were deemed too important to be drafted. But as the war progressed and they needed more people, they started to get rid of these exceptions, and Brecht was later drafted into military service in 1918. He didn't really serve in an area or a field that would be considered the front lines, but he was working in medical areas, and as a result he did see a lot of the people who he was friends with and who were part of his circle of people die due to the war. And his experiences of this obviously continued to shape his political positions and his views, and a lot of his early beginnings as a writer can be traced back to the First World War. In fact, many of his first published writings were written towards the end of the First World War, and his first full-length play was written in 1918, which was during the final year of the war, or I think it's actually the second to last year of the war. My bad. He was very active during the interwar period, as were many artists. People were sort of coming out of the war, and they're sort of looking at the world that, they were looking at the conditions that existed in the world prior to the war, and they were sort of starting to critique and wonder, maybe we shouldn't live in a society that allows for these large-scale wars and human suffering to take place. And so he becomes very active, along with many other writers during the interwar period in Weimar, Germany. And he creates these works that are, first and foremost, pieces of art. One of his most famous works, the Threepenny Opera, and another one, the St. Joan of the Stockyards. They started to critique things like capitalism more and more, and critiquing the government and its role in how they were treating people. And at this time, Brecht also became involved with the Independent Social Democratic Party, which was a left-wing political party. And for a while, for Brecht, this was fine. He was allowed to express his political opinions and his political views, largely until the Nazis began to take power. After the Nazis took power, they saw this person, and they saw him critiquing capitalism and critiquing the excess power of governments and unfair class structures, and soon after that, his works were banned. I believe that was in 1930, or probably 1933. Brecht left Nazi Germany in 1933, fearing the Nazis may persecute him. And he went to Sweden, although some sources did say he went to Denmark, so I'm not really sure about that. But after a while in Sweden, he began to fear that as the Nazis expanded out of Germany, that he may be next. So he moved to Finland. And then things got to be a little bit shaky in Finland as well, with the Soviets and the Nazis at their doorstep. Later, Brecht came to the U.S., and he resided in the U.S. for a while and published some writings there. But after a while, he faced persecution not from the Nazis but from the United States government, which began to conduct investigations into him, and he was subpoenaed to appear by the House Un-American Activities Committees for his views. And if you know anything about the House Un-American Activities Committee, they basically sought to persecute people who had specific political views, or even if they didn't have specific political views, they sought to silence them for dissenting. And somewhat famously, he did decide to appear before the House of Representatives, and he did testify. Many of the people who were subpoenaed did not testify as an act of protest, but he did not join them. Later on in life, Brecht decided to move to East Germany and later settled in East Berlin, where he would live until he died in 1956. Brecht has a pretty substantial legacy that he left behind. He was really someone who drew influences from his contemporaries in Europe, from the other expressionist artists, from artists in the past, and he also drew from areas like Asia and works that were published long in the past. And unlike many other artists at the time, Brecht wasn't aiming to destroy the works that were published in the past or from other areas of the world. He wanted to repurpose them and make them more accessible to the general public. Brecht pioneered the concept of modern epic drama, which were kind of like their Greek counterparts, longer form plays and writings, which they would come to influence many other writers. And through these epic dramas, he would usually point out some flaw or characteristic of society that he disliked and believed he needed to change. And these were used to critique contemporary European society as well as the crimes of the Nazis and pretty much anyone who Brecht thought deserved a scolding at the time. So in summation, Brecht has left really an incredible legacy on the works of opera and poetry, but also into other fields like writing and screenwriting and just art in general. And so really he is one of the most beloved and well-known German expressionist artists. And that's the end of my presentation, and that's my works cited.